Democracy. The concept is sometimes taken for granted. It takes patience and often requires persistence and tenacity. When we say that our Making Democracy Work Award honors an individual who has contributed to our community upholding the tenets and ideals of democracy, we are speaking of Ms. Cheryl Ashe. We are speaking of an individual who does not give up or back down when faced with obstacles and impediments.
When we thought about nominating Cheryl for this award, I started thinking about what it means to make democracy work. What is it that you have to do? And it seemed to me that, as a citizen, we were all asked to participate in civic life and to vote and to care for our fellow citizens and make sure that everybody has access.
When I think of Cheryl, I have a number of adjectives come to mind. She's caring, she's compassionate, she's committed. And all of those attributes define who she is. But she's also full of energy, determination. She has resolve. But Cheryl has spent a lifetime helping others, helping those who are disenfranchised, helping those who are in need, helping the blind, helping prisoners, helping people to vote, making sure that people who need clothing get it. Whatever there is need, there is Cheryl. She's a stalwart in our church. She's a pillar in our community.
Cheryl Ashe is an activist, organizer, librarian, communicator, educator, and leader who has worked to improve the lives of underserved populations. She is a woman who, like the early suffragists, has worked for the improvement of our government through legislative changes. The year 2020 celebrates 100 years of the legal right of women to vote in the United States. Women's suffrage, which fought for voting rights, was established over the course of more than half a century. In 1869, two competing organizations were formed. One organization was led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The other was led by Lucy Stone. After years of rivalry, they merged in 1890 as the National American Woman's Suffrage Association, with Susan B. Anthony as its leader. They had hoped that the U.S. Supreme Court would rule that women had a constitutional right to vote. They were unsuccessful. The suffragists began the decades-long campaign for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In 1916, Alice Paul formed the National Woman's Party, NWP, a militant group focused on the passage of a national suffrage amendment. Over 200 NWP supporters, the Silent Sentinels, were arrested in 1917 while picketing the White House. Many of them went on a hunger strike and endured forced feedings after being sent to prison. After a hard-fought series of votes in the U.S. Congress and in state legislatures, the 19th Amendment was ratified as part of the U.S. Constitution on August 18, 1920. On August 26, 1920, it was signed into law. The amendment states, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The League of Women Voters was launched immediately after the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 to support the new women's suffrage rights. In 1981, after completing a master's degree in library science from Indiana University, Bloomington, Cheryl accepted a position as the library director of the Talking Book Center for the Blind in Gainesville, Georgia.
Following her visit to the library that day, The transition to her new position seemed smooth until she returned to Bloomington and called the supervisor to tell her the date she would be reporting to work. To Cheryl's surprise, the supervisor said she was not sure how people would react to having a black librarian. Cheryl's answer was, the Talking Book Center, Library for the Blind, is part of the Library of Congress, and the Library of Congress is supported by federal tax dollars. My father has paid federal taxes for 60 years, so if people who are blind do not want to get audiobooks from me because I am black, I will just stay in the library and listen to the audiobooks by myself. After intervention from the dean of the Indiana University Bloomington Law School, Cheryl's new position remained intact. Despite the racial profiling, poverty, and inequality in that Southern community, she recognized that she could empower underserved citizens in the area through an expansion of audio services, so she moved to Georgia. One evening, Cheryl shared dinner with some of her patrons in the home of a woman who would later serve on the library board and her sighted husband. After Cheryl left, some of the guests asked their sighted host what their librarian looked like. He reported, she's tall and she has a beautiful smile, freckles, and a short afro. The guests quickly turned in the direction of one man sitting at the table as another guest said, Jimmy, you better not have said anything bad to Cheryl. Flustered, he answered, No, I never said anything bad. Even Jimmy the Klansman knew what Cheryl had done for his friends who were blind and for him especially. She knew he favored sexy romantic novels, his French books as he called them, so Cheryl supplied him with not only his requested audiobooks, but with a headset so he could listen far from his mother's prying ears. These experiences in the Georgia mountains became a blueprint for Cheryl's life work.
There's another meaning to making democracy work. And the idea is, I'm going to make this democracy work if it's the last thing I do. And democracy, making it work, almost using your own power and your own force.
Starting in 2012, she began lobbying Indiana legislators to make it possible for people with felony drug convictions to receive food stamps by changing the law that barred them from the program. The proposed change died several legislative deaths in 2013, 2014, and 2015. In 2016, it passed to the Senate, where it died yet again. Finally, in 2018, the bill passed both chambers of the Indiana General Assembly, and the law was changed.
From somebody who has, grown up kind of on the streets and has had a criminal background almost their entire life.
For 11 years, Joshua Grove spent his time behind bars on multiple charges, having limited access to his daughters. It took more than a decade for him to realize something needed to change.
It took my daughter crying on the telephone to really snap me out of doing my life for me and, towards doing my life for them.
Grove is now working and making up for lost time with his daughters, but working 40 hours a week sometimes just isn't enough.
Just everyday living expenses, food is the last thing I think about.
And some weeks dinner isn't served. He's always been hoping for food stamps, but never able to apply because of his convictions.
And I said, this is ridiculous, it's gotta change.
Cheryl Ashe is a convicted felons advocate in South Bend. She began pushing for a change to the 1996 welfare reform, restricting convicted drug felons from applying for SNAP benefits.
It was punishing people who turned their lives around. And it really hit when we had the recession. Factories were closing.
Since then, she's been working to get the law changed, and on January 1st of 2020, she'll finally see it become reality, as convicted drug felons will be eligible to apply for food stamps.
Going from having an empty refrigerator to a full refrigerator, going from feeding, the kids hot dogs to, actual meals, that's a huge difference.
I can think of no one more deserving of this Making Democracy Award No other recipient is more deserving than Cheryl.